Hi, it's been nearly 5 years since the collapse of Lehman Brothers, and more recently we've had MF Global and Peregrine, and the idea of inappropriately using customer funds has been a topic that doesn't seem to go away. I'm Matt Simon, Senior Analyst at Tab Group. I'm here with Niraj Batra, an analyst at Tab Group, and we recently came out with a piece around LSOC, legally separate, operationally commingled, and the idea of increasing segregation for customer assets. Niraj, this is somewhat of an obscure topic. The regulations came out in November for the OTC by the regulators' environment in terms of imposing LSOC. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've been hearing and what you've been seeing and why we wrote this report?
Sure. So the regulators, before they came out with LSOC, looked at the current omnibus model that's prevalent in the futures market, and they felt some areas needed some enhancements. And with mandatory clearing kicking in, they felt the cleared swap market, which is a much bigger market than the futures market, needed an enhanced model. As a result, like you said, they implemented LSOC back in November. LSOC is intended to improve customer asset protection under Dodd-Frank.
And so phase one, is what they've been calling it, of LSOC, that is now requirements for, on the OTC side, people need to display initial margin, is that correct?
That's correct. So initial margin will be reported on a daily basis to the DCO. DCO is the Derivatives Clearing Organization, or the clearinghouse. And so the big fundamental difference between LSOC and the current segregation model in futures is that the initial margin that is held at the DCO on behalf of the customer cannot be used if another customer defaults. So for example, right now in the futures model, if a customer were to default, and as a result that FCM defaulted as well because they could not offset those losses, the DCO could go technically into another customer's account and get their initial margin and use it to offset the losses. Under LSOC, that is forbidden. You will not be allowed to do that. So
all of this safety in terms of the idea, it sounds great, but it's raising, I mean, what I've been hearing, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you've been hearing, is it raises the operational and technology cost for both the FCM community and customers of the FCMs. Did you hear some of the same?
That's correct. So our view, based on my research, we have two sides to the argument. We have one side, which you're saying that a lot of the buy side is thinking it's an increase in trading costs, it's an increase in operational cost on the customer as well as the FCM. You know, for FCMs, and they're not ready for many of these implementation rules. They have to upgrade their systems. They have to hire more operational. And on the other side, you have people saying, based on those events that have happened in the last 5 years, this is a good rule. It is going to protect our assets better. Although it won't prevent another MF Global, it is definitely going to protect those assets better because LSOC does create that transparency. So if another, God forbid, if another MF Global happens in the next few years, LSOC won't prevent that, but the transparency that it creates, it is going to lead to more effective porting of those positions to another solvent FCM.
So at this point, phase one has been implemented. Phase two, so you're assuming, or as far as we've been hearing, phase two will go forward in terms of there will be more additional mandates made forward by LSOC?
Yeah, sure. So phase two was supposed to be implemented earlier this year in Q1. But as of now, it hasn't been implemented by any of the DCOs, and it's supposed to be implemented in the next few months. And phase two is going to require that each FCM, in addition to posting the initial margin of the customer, also post any access margin that the customer has. Right now, it's still not. It's still being in, I guess, test mode, but it should be implemented in the next few months.
Okay. So in terms of another bankruptcy, you mentioned, God forbid an MF Global was to happen again, what would happen? Like what would be the steps that, in terms of the porting? Do we know that at this point, or are we still, is that what we're still debating? Well,
that is the intent of LSOC. So right now, if another bankruptcy were to happen, the rules under LSOC should enhance the portability process because the DCO will have transparency at all levels. He'll know whose initial margin belongs to what customer. He'll know access collateral, for each customer as well. He'll have full transparency on the positions, so it will lead to more effective porting to a solvent.
So I guess my last question is then, so improved segregation, better insurance of customer funds. Why are some of the firms on the buy side, or why would customers be unhappy with such a model?
Well, it all comes down to cost. One might think, LSOC is really not increasing costs. It's mandatory clearing is increasing costs. But the fact of the matter is that because of LSOC, a lot of the FCMs and a lot of the DCOs have increased their costs. For example, the DCOs are increasing the guaranteed funds that are required by the FCM to post. FCMs are also going to have more frequent margin calls. And all this kind of dwells down to the customer, where their costs are also going to increase.
So at this point, it seems like it's a balance between the cost of implementing LSOC and the insurance to having customer funds protected in the case of an FCM bankruptcy. You should read Neeraj's recent piece, The Safety of LSOC. It's available to our Tab Group subscribers. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Matt Simon, Senior Analyst at Tab Group. This is Neeraj Batra, Analyst at Tab Group.